Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's webinar, and it's the first one of 2021. So just wishing you all a happy new year. Understandably, we've had a tough year in 2020, and it's probably going to be quite disruptive this year. So please accept, that we all struggle with things, and studies have been added to that, and we've all made it through. So well done for making it through a tough year. And just on that note, I lost a friend of ours, to COVID this morning. So it is tough, and my condolences to anybody who's struggling with those type of situations. So today we're going to be talking about proposals. So first weekly webinar of the year. I'm very excited to get going with this important topic. But before we do that, I just want to wish you all absolutely happy new year and best wishes with your studies. Can you all just start saying hello in the chat? I see we've got quite a good number of people coming through, which is absolutely fantastic. So just as always, please show some love in the chat there. And as you're doing that, just want to show you around here my new studio that I've created. You can see there just the thumbnail of the YouTube video that I created about my studio transformation, which I put together in the holidays. So I took a week or so and just took a corner of my garage and created a studio. Yes, hello there, Michelle, Charlize, hello guys, hope you're all well. Looks like we got people coming from around the world, which is fantastic. So hello Vaughan from Pretoria, a very warm welcome. Those of you that don't know me, just by way of introduction, my name is Peter Alkemer, and you're part of now the brand and our online platform called the Student Success Coach. So the website is up there, and we also just went live with the podcast. So lots of fascinating and insightful and useful things that you guys can take advantage of to be as successful as you can, certainly with regards to your studies and many other aspects of life. And those of you that see my content over a number of years will see that I talk about many other areas as well, and I hope you'll be able to benefit from that. All right, so there's a little bit of a before and after transformation. All right, so good day to everyone. Moketsi, Ashley, Benjamin, Nonshlanshla, Stephanie, fantastic guys. Also just mention which universities you're from or where you're from around the world. Always good just to see the mix. Happy New Year, Cara. So Cara, congratulations, she got engaged, and that was, I think, the last webinar at the end of last year. We were having a discussion with Dr. Jeff, who's a double PhD, and we were asking everybody just to pop their challenges on the chat, and Cara said that she was procrastinating with her studies and she was trying to get through her exams and just couldn't sit down and get her work done. So myself and Jeff took a few minutes just to coach her, and I spoke about burning her boats, and I said we'll make a commitment to all of us that she's going to get a few hours studies done this afternoon. She did. She got through exams and she got engaged. So that was a double bonus for Cara. So welcome to you, Andres. Good to have you as well. Always regular on our session. So thanks very much, Andres. Thanks very much for joining us. Absolutely wonderful to see you guys. And now just let's get into a bit more of specifically the proposals discussion for today. So we've got a lot of great content and good value that you're going to get out of today. And a bit later on, I'll give you free access into the full course on proposals, and you guys can go through a lot more detail there, and we'll touch on a lot of that in the next sort of 45 minutes. But what I would like to know from you in the chat now is what specifically you are, struggling with in terms of proposals, and also, do you have an actual presentation coming up? Do you have a deadline around the corner? Some of you might actually be, really now under pressure to get proposals done, and we're here to help you with that and answer those specific questions. But for others of you on the session today, it might be that it's one of a number of things that you're busy with this year to get a proposal out there. Maybe it's a research module that's coming up later in the year, and just well done for joining today and making sure that's one thing that you are thinking about ahead of time, because as I teach very constantly, you want to be writing early and often and well, obviously, and that applies to proposals as well. So very good that you in the session that you are thinking ahead of time, before you get into that crunch period of getting a proposal done. I don't know if Yolandi's on the call. I know that in the previous webinar, she said that she had a proposal due. It was either late November, and I think it had been pushed out to February or late January this year. So please just do mention what specifically with regards to proposals or anything relating to that. In these weekly sessions, we cover many different aspects related to academic study. I just picked proposals to kick us off simply because that might be something that's on people's minds to get us going. But throughout the rest of the year, and we're going to try and aim to have these sessions once a week, because we've been getting so much good feedback from everybody, and people are getting, I think, so much value from them. Just gives you really good access into insights, not only from myself, but from other people that we'll be interviewing in the session. But I am very keen, just like we did with Cara, to answer specific questions and solve specific problems for people. So if you do have, a proposal that is due and you're busy working on one, and perhaps you're trying to get that writing done, then I'm here to answer those specific questions. And then when you leave this webinar today, you can actually take action and go and improve that paragraph or that section or that part of your proposal. So just, lots of people joining today. Fantastic. It's an amazing response. So Vaughan is starting his master's thesis in law this year and needs to submit his proposal. So Vaughan, good luck, and probably a good time to start thinking about it. If you need to get a submission done, depending on how far you've done, what work you've completed already, this session is going to be absolutely perfect for you. I would suggest you then, straight after the webinar, enroll in the course and go through in a lot more detail the activities and the lessons. And in the session, I'll mention what you're going to get in that course, but you'll actually get my own PhD proposal as well as my PhD proposal presentation, so you can actually see those documents, but we're going to talk you through a lot of those now. But I think, Vaughan, what's going to be really great for you and people in the same situation as Vaughan, if you've got 2 or 3 months, this is perfect for you, because now you're going to get the mindset right. You're going to understand the big building blocks, of what needs to go into your proposal. And so we're going to help you with that for your master's thesis form. So no, absolute pleasure. Stick around, and all of you stick around, because we got lots to give you guys, and lots of value to give you out there. Comfy, University of Pretoria, fantastic to have you guys on board. Tuckies, lots of Pretoria, fantastic, bright, good morning, and welcome. So just, I think, before we get started, what I did promise to provide you was just a quick link into my new studio, and so you can go and check it out when you've got a chance, and it'll just give you some insight into where I'm broadcasting from. Those of you that have been in a couple of webinars, that was in my study, but I've got now a proper space where I can create some great content for everybody and host these webinars. Ikara says, I learned a great deal in my honors regarding research, but masters in next level, I need help. Okay, so this is such a brilliant point that you made, Ikara, because as you sort of progress through levels of academic study, you are going to see increasingly higher levels of expectations around what it is that you're going to be doing in terms of your proposals. And the concepts and principles that I teach today are going to apply even at a module of, let's say, a postgraduate diploma, but just at a smaller scale. And then, that scale is just going to get bigger and bigger as you go through honors and masters, and then ultimately into a PhD. And there may be some other aspects that creep into that. But most definitely the principles that you learn and that you can apply, through those different levels are going to be largely the same, but it's just going to be the volume and the scale, and I would say the complexity, that you're going to have to, think about as you work on your proposal. So, Kirsten, maybe just to pop your comment up on the screen. Will this video be saved and accessible later? Yes. So, Kirsten, the exact same link, that you joined this live stream, you can go and click that same link again, and you'll get the video. And maybe just as I answer Kirsten's question there, please do make sure that you go and subscribe. So if you subscribe onto the YouTube channel, then you'll get all of that value. You can also join the mailing list. The links are down below. I'll add those into the chat as well. And if you come into the Facebook group, that's where we also have lots of discussion, and we announce these events and so on. And you can get obviously lots more information, and then ask questions as well. And the other thing that I always tell people is I'm actually also accessible on a one-on-one basis. Very happy to have a 30-minute call. I don't charge for that. And the best way to get hold of me is through the Facebook group. Okay, and then let's just have a quick look at Makabongwe Saziba. Good day, just completed a master's philosophy and registering for PhD soon. Fantastic. So good luck with that. And even when you register, and we're going to talk about this just now, you need to be thinking about your proposal, because the university is going to ask you to start filling in forms where it says, what is your topic? And then as they start allocating you supervisors, so you need to be narrowing in on exactly what it is that you need to be thinking about. So we will definitely help you today, Makabongwe. Just really get your mind focused so that you can zoom in on what you're doing. Okay, Michelle, I'm struggling to focus my topic. First was too broad, now it's too specific. How do I go? Okay, fantastic. So let's just go then into this afternoon session. And really what we're going to cover in this session is what I've shown you there. And that is then basically how you get started. And getting started is all about doing sufficient background reading, making sure that you've got the right the right topic set up, and then there's three big things that your proposal needs to deal with. Three big questions that your proposal needs to answer. And when we go into high level academic study, it's very easy. You're doing law, you're doing medicine, you're doing engineering. You get into the detail of it, and you're passionate about it, and this is what you want to do, and you're hoping it's going to drive career prospects, and that's absolutely fantastic. But you always need to be able to step back and say, somebody coming into this, can I describe to them in my proposal what I'm going to do? And then the second big question and objective that you need to achieve with the proposal is, why are you going to do it? And then how? And we're going to deal with all of those. So the question that came up just now, was in terms of being too broad and then too narrow. And the other thing that we'll touch on in the session, and I will show you in a lot more detail in the course that you can enroll in for free through the link that I'll give you just now, is a thesis statement, how to construct a good thesis statement. And when you construct that good thesis statement, that's like your North Star. And that protects the scope, if you like, of your study. And I think the only, if you've got those principles and practices right, you just then have to decide in your own mind what goes into that thesis statement. And as long as it's something that's going to keep you engaged for the period of your research, it's very important to protect the boundaries of that thesis statement. Because as you say, if it's too narrow, the significance to your field is going to be limited. But if it's too broad, you're going to struggle to actually finish. So there's always that toss-up between the two aspects of, how broad and how wide you want to make your topic. So those are all very good points, just by way of introduction, that we need to think about as we get into this important topic of proposals this afternoon. Okay, so guys, let's start then. And so we've gone through the three questions, and I think now let's just then drill down into that a little bit. And what you'll get in the course as well is a whiteboard lesson, which I've just taken a screen grab of there, highlighting, as I've mentioned, the what, the why, and the how. And this really, for me, is the most important thing for you to think about in terms of constantly assessing your proposal and the actual document, and then when you do a presentation, and how you deal with the questions that you'll get in your presentation if you do want the proposal. And also as you go through your study and you get pulled in different directions and you have limitations that's creeping up, are you able to go back to that, simple three levels of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. Okay, and just a reminder, I will start popping a couple of links on the chat so that you can get into all the value that's available through the Student Success Coach. Versatile says, before I dropped out last year, I had a challenge grasping the difference between methods and methodology. Okay, good question. We're going to get to that in the how section. So in the how section, we talk about methodology, because how you do something in an academic research sense is going to be through a set of academic methods. You're going to use certain instruments. You need to position yourself philosophically, and then you're going to go into your field, and you're going to obviously work according to some sort of plan. But the academic activities that you take and steps and sequences that you take are going to be driven by methods and methodology. But to answer your question right off the bat, I would say, you get a broader sort of overall methodology. If I could think of an example, in my PhD, I use grounded theory. You might have something like case study or mixed methods, etc. And then within there, you might sort of have individual methods. I think it's just a difference between the level at which you're operating and thinking about how you're going to do your research. Okay, so let's get into then the what. So, very importantly, you need to be able to explain, what you're doing in your research. I was interviewing somebody, on the podcast recently, which, by the way, is live on Spotify and a couple of other platforms. So hop on there and you'll, listen to some inspiring student success stories every week. In fact, we had a fantastic interview with Prof. Ivan Hofsire, who's the postgraduate coordinator at Wits Engineering faculty. That went live on Wednesday. I'll dig out that link and send it to you because it's really a masterclass from a lecturer's perspective, about postgraduate studies, and the insights that you get in that interview, I think, will be incredibly important for you. But this other lady that I interviewed on the podcast, I asked her, she had just actually got a distinction, I think, for a master's. And I asked her, at the early stages, what she felt she did well. And one of the things she said was to do lots of background reading. So, those of you that have just sort of registered or you've got your proposal, due in a few months, you've still got time to keep doing lots of reading. And this is probably what's motivated you to get into further studies. And we're living in a time of disruption and COVID, and I still passionately believe that it is good, rigorous academic research that is going to help solve the world's problems. And so, immersing yourself in your field, going down different lines of inquiry. And one of the actions that I, encourage people to take in the course is to get yourself a notebook, write some questions, and be intentional about, reading other research, other studies, blog articles, news articles, even contemporary sources. Just remember that, things like Wikipedia and newspapers and articles, etc., those are all secondary research. You've got to go back to the primary research to make sure that you get the original first-hand study and research that was done. And whether you're, jotting, notes from all of this down in a physical or digital notebook absolutely doesn't matter. I give you a couple of tips and tricks, from my own experience, and they all work, exceptionally well. And all of that really then starts to inform what you're doing in your research. And then there are a couple of things, I'm not going to go through all of them in the course. I'll actually walk you through, my proposal, and then you'll see in detail the different sections, and I'll allude to some of them here. And please do mention in the chat if there are any specifics that come up with regards to the specific topic around, what it is that you're studying. Chapisho says he's in the process of applying for a fellowship, and part of the application process includes submitting a 2-page research proposal, including a reference. I'm struggling to fit everything into 2 pages. Well, Chapisho, I would, if you've just got 2 pages, if you haven't been given a template, those 2 pages, you should divide it up into 3 sections, just like I've got on the flip chart there, on the previous slide. What are you doing, why are you doing it, and how are you doing it? And you are going to struggle if you've got a lot of references to add it in there. But with 2 pages, you just have to keep kind of focused on these 3 big areas of work that you're going to have to do for your proposal. Okay, so think about, your objective. Is there some kind of problem that you're trying to solve? And we'll talk a little bit just now about significance and contribution. But when you think about, what it is that you want to study, you're going to have the broad field within which you want to, read and make a contribution. But you probably have some idea of where there are issues. And maybe it's something that you've understood from the world and you want to answer with academic research and then make a contribution back into the world. Or perhaps something in the literature has identified potentially that there's a gap, and that you think solving that gap in the literature is going to make a contribution to knowledge. So defining what you're going to put in your study makes you link your work with the world of the reader. And when you write that introduction to the proposal, you're bringing the context of the real world into academia, and then you're drilling deeper and deeper down. And as we spoke about just now, again, you've got to get down to some narrow problem statements, some narrow objectives that you want to accomplish with your study, a very well-defined thesis statement. So those are all some things that you need to think about. One of the things that I was actually criticized in my final report of my PhD was, insufficient definition of key concepts. So very important that early on in your proposal, you define key concepts. So, this is again about avoiding jargon and making your work, accessible for people. It's mostly going to be read in an academic context, but there will be a handful of key concepts that, if you don't set them up front, people are going to get into work and start to get confused. So that, I certainly feel is very important. And then let's just talk then about a good thesis statement, because I think, this is an exercise that you should do. And the folk who've mentioned that they've got, proposals due and are registering in the next couple of months, etc. I would say this is the one thing that you need to do. Go and follow through this whiteboard lesson in the course, where I take an example as I've got there, and I've drawn a boundary around that as an example of a thesis statement. And it must really answer the question, what will you investigate? So you want to investigate a statement. You want to then be able to apply methods and research discipline and your time and effort and the support of your institution to find out more about that investigation, to find out more about that topic through some rigorous academic investigation. And so, that thesis statement, as I've got there on the flip chart, it needs to be a single statement, and it needs to be unambiguous. So the one that I've written there, and in the lesson I go through it, it's very specific. It can't be misinterpreted. It can be tested. It's got limited scope. And also, very importantly, and this talks to the thing that we mentioned earlier, you're going to have, honors, masters, PhD, and your thesis statement is going to also be guided by how much time and energy you've got to spend on doing this investigation. And that's, again, where your supervisors will guide you in terms of what, level you're doing your proposal at. And again, that was the scale, a topic that I mentioned. And when you get to a PhD, obviously, you're going to have 3, 4, 5 years of your life in which you can, spend, and will be the time frame of your investigation for that thesis statement. And again, it must talk to, a time aspect, when, how, who. It must be very focused. It must be linked to your area of interest. A thesis statement is something that may be very topical now, but might not be topical in 3 years, or it might not be so topical now, but it could be topical in 3 years' time. Imagine people who had written thesis statements 3 years ago to try and, address, COVID or whatever we knew about it by then. Suddenly, that research becomes incredibly important and helps the world develop vaccines. And you've got to understand the cyclical nature of the importance and the interest, the level of interest that you have in that thesis statement. But writing a good thesis statement, I think, is going to be one of the most important things that you do in terms of defining the what of your proposal. Okay, so spend some time going through that, and I would really suggest doing an exercise at home, as part of getting your proposal done. Write up that thesis statement and then test it. Test that thesis statement. So ask somebody, could it be misinterpreted? Ask somebody whether they think it could be done within an honors or a master's or a PhD. Ask somebody if they think that you are deeply invested and passionate in that topic, and whether it's going to continue being relevant, over the next few years. So that thesis statement is going to act like a North Star. It's going to help you get through your studies successfully, and very important that you do that very well. And I think, action that you can take out of the session, so those of you that, have got pressing deadlines, is, either go into your proposal, or as part of writing a proposal in those earlier sections, the introduction, etc., do you have that thesis statement? Are you able to write that down? And I've just put a link there to the Facebook group. Put a thesis statement in the Facebook group and test it with us and say, guys, this is my thesis statement. Do you think it's clear enough? Do you think it's, focused enough? And do you think it's going to be, suitable at a certain level? So get input on that. But of course, most importantly, your supervisors, your institutions, etc. And then to those of you that are sort of registering or needing to confirm a topic, with your institution, etc. This is often a good subtitle or a secondary explanation of what it is that you're doing in your research. And you may need to answer this before you're actually ready with your proposal, but usually the university will then ask you to confirm that topic and the sort of subtext of your topic, once you've been through a proposal presentation. But that thesis statement is going to really help you, certainly in terms of the paperwork and the process as you're going through the early stages of getting ready with your proposal submission process, etc. Okay, and then I'm just going to put the link here to the podcast, so hop on there, subscribe, and pick up the latest episode with the professor that I interviewed from Wits University. And he talks there quite a bit about postgraduate life and how you should approach your studies, and certainly in a disrupted post-COVID world, I think that's going to be very important for us. Okay, so we've dealt with the what, and if you do a good job in your proposal, in terms of the what, there's a lot in that introduction and the context and the background reading and the problem statements and the key concepts, etc., that you can actually then use to put into your final report. Okay, I'm just going to deal with this question. Is a thesis statement and a concept not the same thing? It's not the same thing. So a key concept is something that's part of your studies. So let's say, I'll take my example. I was studying agile software engineering in large organizations. So a key concept there would be to define what is a large organization. So in your thesis statement, you'll talk about concepts. If you look at the one on the board there, peanut butter sandwiches are effective for reducing hunger in tennis players, okay, as an example. So you'll need to define what's a peanut butter sandwich, and I'm being simplistic here. But a thesis statement will have some concepts in it. So you'll have a thesis statement in your proposal. You'll discuss it and go through it and present it and highlight it as your thesis statement. But there'll be some concepts in your thesis statement that you need to define. So elsewhere in your proposal, you'll have a section, and you'll see it when you go through the course, and I take you through my proposal and my final report, in actual fact, you'll see a section that says key concepts. So you would define then, like I did in my study, what is agile software engineering? What is a large organization? What is grounded theory potentially? Although you would do a bit more definition on that in the methodology section. So people aren't going to be able to understand a thesis statement if you introduce key concepts that may be misinterpreted or may need additional level of understanding. So I hope that that cleared that up. And again, in the course, you'll actually see my documents and you'll be able to go through it. Sabelo, currently putting together a skeleton of my proposal. I'd be happy to come out with webinar with some guidelines and direction. Okay, fantastic. So Sabelo, skeleton is good, and I teach this in all my courses, is to think with that end in mind. You're going to have to submit this document and work backwards from that. Don't go through it from start to finish as a writing process. Put the big sections out there. And, obviously going to call these slightly different things, but in your proposal, your what is going to be pretty much your introduction. And then in your introduction, you're going to have a problem statement section. You're going to have key concepts as a section. You're going to have your thesis statement as a section. You're also going to have things like a motivation. So let's talk about that very quickly. And this, I think, will answer your question, Sabelo. Some guidelines and direction around, the earlier introductory section of a proposal is going to be to define your contribution. So your contribution could be that you think you're going to find a cure for COVID-19. I don't know, whatever. So that's your contribution. Now, 5 years ago, that the significance of that contribution would not be as great as it is today, right? So there's a contribution in the narrow definition of the sense to the field, but is there significance in that contribution? What is the real world application of it? How are you going to make a contribution to the world? Remember, we spoke about a problem statement. Is your contribution, by going through your research study, going to solve that problem? If that problem is significant, then your research has a high level of significance. So these are all the things that you need to be thinking about in that introductory section up at the front there. Okay, so hopefully that answered a couple of the questions there. Just having a look there. Please, guys, keep the questions coming and we'll deal with them as we go through it. All right, then why? So now that's sort of leading on from what I was talking about. And your motivation, is going to have to be linked to the problem statement that you want to solve. And very often, if you have to get funding for your research, the people that are going to be paying for your research are going to be interested and say, well, why should I, fund this research? What is the contribution that I'm going to get out of it? And if you look at, new drugs that come onto the market, if you look at new products, that get sold, there is an incredible amount of research that very often goes behind these products, and industry and designers and companies will look at research to understand and make decisions, about what products they want to commercialize. And so in whatever field or faculty you are studying, you need to be able to make that link with the world of commerce, of business, if you have to be getting funding, and it could be in a non-governmental sense, public sector, for example. All of those are going to have a context that they're coming from that says, we need to solve some problems. There's some researchers available that are interested in doing research in this field. Let's make sure that what we're willing to pay for is, going to solve a problem through that researcher's contribution, and that contribution is significant enough for us to fund this research, or just for the institution. If your studies are paid for and you're blessed and you've got funding and support and financially independent to do that, that's fantastic, well done, and great news. But your institution is still going to have to say, yes, we sign off this proposal, we approve you to do the study. We think that there is sufficient significance, in the study through the contribution you're going to make. And again, your background reading and immersing yourself in the field is going to help, answer that question, because you're going to start understanding, is there gaps? And a lot of good research and other final reports and articles, etc., are always going to have a section at the end that's called future work. And this is a very tip that I would really like you to take away, is in your scanning of articles and reading of literature, etc., go through it, but then at the end, look for that section that says future work. And there they will make recommendations. They will say, you can extend this work if you look at this angle, or if you add this aspect or this dimension, etc. And there could be a blueprint for you in terms of defining, the motivation for your study, because other research was done, it hasn't been completed, this researcher recommended we take it in a certain direction. And as I say, you'll pick up those gaps in the literature and will help you define the significance of the study. Palesa just asked for assistance in clarifying the theoretical framework. Very good question. And very often in my one-on-one coaching calls, this is the first question that I ask, because a theoretical framework creates some scaffolding, if you like, for your work. So, scaffolding is not the building. The building is the contribution that you make, it's your results, it's the thing that you create. But you're using the scaffolding to build that building, okay? And, there are, so many different ways of approaching and talking about theoretical frameworks, but the simplest way that I've come to think about it over the years is that it's some sort of visualization or metaphor or construct for the concepts in your field. So in my PhD, I use grounded theory, through which, as an inductive method, you can generate theory and you can create a theoretical framework. So what was my theoretical framework that I came up with? It was a simple range, and it was a range of measuring sentiment in agile software development teams. And my theoretical framework was that there were relative degrees of sentiment in teams. There was a positive sentiment on one end of the range and a negative sentiment on the other end of the range. You could have a theoretical framework that describes relationships between key concepts. You could have, a relationship that, or a framework, that has some sort of coding or some sort of theoretical reference numbers allocated to things that occur in your field, or some sort of scale, if you like, that helps you understand the severity or the degree to which something impacts something else. So a theoretical framework is, if you are doing an inductive research method like grounded theory, you've got a relative degree of freedom to actually create a theoretical framework. But if you're doing a deductive method, you're going to be assessing existing theoretical frameworks. So let's say, for example, let me give you a very simple example. A theoretical framework for juvenile remediation in Zimbabwe during the late 90s indicated that there were three main things that counselors needed to focus on, as an example. And the theoretical framework says that through studies and research in that field, within those dimensions, consistently highlighted that those three things were the most important to consider when, remediating or rehabilitating juvenile delinquents, for example. And I know that is some research that is being done in our community. And as a deductive methodology, whatever it is that you choose, you would be taking that theoretical framework and then potentially testing it. So you would say, okay, well, I've found a fourth one, for for example, or I don't believe these are the right 3. I think there is only 2, for example, or I think there's a lot more that needs to be considered. Or if the field is relatively open and there isn't enough theoretical framework out there at the moment, then, as I say, you might be creating one. So it can often be as simple as that. Okay, let's crack on and just look then at the next aspect of it. So, and I think we're starting to get to this where, we talk about theoretical frameworks, and we mentioned earlier about methodology and methods, etc. And, in the course, there's a couple of lessons about, how you should explain and how you're going to do your research. So, that talks again to the methodology. And as we said earlier, within a methodology, you're going to have some methods and some instruments. Are you doing surveys? Are you doing interviews? What is the steps that you take? What is the research process that you're going to go through? But what I do find that people miss quite a lot, and I've had very good feedback on my courses previously, is that you need to position yourself before you just dive into methodology. Now, again, at a narrower level of research, I wouldn't spend too much time on this, but certainly at master's and definitely PhD, you need to position yourself philosophically. And you need to be sure in your own mind, even though it's an implicit choice that you skipped when you jumped into your choice of methodology, for your examiner and potentially your supervisor, you need to position yourself as being a participant in your research and part of the world within which this research is done. And therefore, how is knowledge created? How is it that you as a researcher do you influence your ability to objectively gather data? Are you an intrinsic aspect of the gathering of that data? And there are certain implications that those philosophical implicit mindsets that you have will determine not only your choice of methodology, but how you actually go about executing on that methodology. So again, I talk about that in some detail in the course. And just to go back to the previous question, there's a very good theoretical framework for that called an onion. And the theoretical framework, again, for positioning yourself, is that you, like an onion, you peel the outer layers before you get to the inner layer. And the inner layer is actually your methods. Are you doing case study? Are you doing mixed methods? But then the outer layers is the philosophy that you take. Are you doing inductive or deductive methods? Are you doing qualitative or quantitative? And you narrow down until you get into that detailed specific methodology. A lot of students jump in and say, I'm going to do case studies, or I'm going to do interviews, or I'm going to do a survey. Okay. Now, that might be an implicit choice based on your strengths, but you need to step back and think to yourself, why do I want to do a survey? Okay, I'm now going to start applying quantitative methods. All right, so I see the world through a quantitative mindset. I believe that numbers matter in the world. Or I'm doing interviews and it's going to be unstructured data, and I need to choose a method like grounded theory because I feel that the world is very gray and that humans, have a very unquantifiable role to play, and that's important to my research. There's a question here. Some universities require research proposal at the stage of applying for a postgraduate course. In the absence of a template, what more to cover over and above answering the 3 questions? So in the course, my answer to you would be go in there and have a look at my research proposal, because that goes into the sections and the subsections, and typically going to be introduction, literature review, methodology, and then a little bit about planning and your sort of next steps and approach to your degree. So remember, Makabongwe, that your final report is going to have mainly 5 big sections. Okay, so again, introduction, literature review, methodology, results, and then conclusion, discussion, etc. Results and conclusion, you haven't done the work yet, so that is going to come out of your study. But introduction, literature review, and methodology, you have some background reading to do. You can define the problem statement and the contribution and the significance of all of that. Your literature review is going to come out of your reading, and there is a section in the course on literature review, but really very quickly, let me break it down. Your literature review needs to take people on a journey from a broad sense and the context in your introduction then to the academic world, and narrow down. And I talk about Venn diagrams, and I say you could have 2 or 3 key topics, and then the overlap of those topics, inside that overlap of a couple of those key topics is where you want to do your study. So that's just very quickly then talking through some of the aspects that you might want to think about in terms of getting the detail of the different sections and subsections in your proposal. And I'll post a link right now to the course that you can go in and get a lot more detail in just now. Right, let's just have a look at a couple of questions. Cara says, what level of independence is expected with the different levels, honors, masters, etc., PhD? Yeah, very good question. And I think it is going to vary. And I think that's simply from a time perspective. So again, as we spoke about, you're going to have a different amount of time to complete, research at those different levels. And so the level of independence is going to be a function of how well the university thinks you can get through the work that you want to do in your research within that time. So if it's a matter of months in a proposal that you're doing for a module of a postgraduate diploma or even an honors level potentially, you may have not so much independence because the university obviously has a vested interest in getting you through. So that level of independence might be a lot less. Whereas if you get to master's and PhD, you've now got, let's say, 2 years in a master's, or maybe even a bit longer. And then in a PhD, you're going to have potentially 4 to 6 years, depending on how much time you're putting into it, whether it's full-time or part-time, etc. And so I would say the level of independence is going to increase, and rightly so, because you should have the flexibility to go and explore your field as a much more capable researcher. So the expectation is that as you go through honors, masters, and PhD, your abilities as a researcher is going to be improving. And so it's just like we learn to crawl, and then we walk, and then we run, and it's just that maturity as we grow as humans. So we will grow and develop increasing maturity and levels of skills as academic research. Tata says, is it always the case that a PhD dissertation should feed into a theory? No, it's not the case. So I can think of a couple of examples. So you could have case study research, for example, and case study research is going to look for patterns, I guess, potentially, either in one example or across a multiple of different data points. I would say that you'll struggle to make a contribution if you're not really explicitly assessing and testing an existing theory or producing and developing a new theory. So Tata, let's just deal with this very quickly. So an inductive method is going to give you a lot of independence. So to Cara's point just now, a lot of independence to go and create new theories. A deductive method is going to test an existing theory. So I think what you're talking to there, Tata, is feeding into a theory is where you're testing a theory. So you're testing the theory, like I mentioned, of rehabilitating juveniles in Zimbabwe requires these 3 focus areas. You're testing that theory. You're saying, well, actually, I've done some research and I found a 4th one, for example. So you're adding to that theory, or you could say those 3 are completely wrong. And let me tell you why. Because I've done the work, I've done the research, I've done the analysis, I've got the credibility in my field, and that was applicable during the 1980s. But now, in 20, 30 years later, these are the reasons why that theory needs to be updated, etc. So Tata, I would say there are some exceptions, but most definitely at a PhD level, there needs to be some theoretical linkages there as much as possible. So my answer would be yes. I think PhD is definitely going to have a theoretical link in there. Okay, then the last point, let's just talk about presenting your proposal. Now, you might not actually be explicitly required to present your proposal, but it is very good practice, because remember, a proposal is kind of like a contract. So you sort of said to your university, okay, this is what I'm going to study, this is why I'm going to study it, and this is how I'm going to study it. And they will then approve that study. And once again, think about it in the different levels as well. So at an honors level, these things are going to happen a lot quicker, right? Because it's all going to be done within a few months. Masters is going to take a bit longer, etc. And PhD, it's going to take even a bit longer than that. So a presentation of your proposal is something I would strongly encourage that you do. And at the high levels, you're going to most definitely have to do one, but gives you almost like a test, of your proposal and your thinking, where you will have to, present your proposal to supervisors. I would suggest you get a couple of experts in, and, just like any contract is sort of tested through some type of discussion or presentation or an opportunity to engage and talk about it, so too that presentation is this opportunity. And you should not rely on, supervisors or other people having provided you all the feedback in the actual written document to get everything that you need. You should anticipate that in your presentation, there are going to be changes. And so I had a version of my proposal before I presented to what is called a panel. And then I had a version of my proposal after the panel. And I was very structured in terms of the questions that came up in that panel and how I dealt with those questions in my proposal. So in the course, what I do also teach is not only obviously the sort of approach that you need to take to presenting an academic research proposal, but also the mechanics of presenting, typically with PowerPoint. Is that something that you will be using, and most probably in an online setting, while we're all still struggling with lockdowns, etc. That PowerPoint presentation will actually become more of a focus in an online setting. Tato, absolute pleasure, no problem. Hope that was helpful. And you can see there the 3 lessons. So the 3 lessons that you get in the course is learn basic PowerPoint features. So I walk through the tips and techniques of PowerPoint, and then I teach you slightly more advanced PowerPoint features. And a lot of us guys, we also part-time, or we're going to end up in employment, and presentations is a very important part of being successful in the workplace. And then there's a lesson there. I take you through some examples of how not to do PowerPoint slides. So that's quite a fun lesson. So that's all in the course, and that's all available for you to have a look at. But I would really encourage you, and by all means, if you don't have to do a formal presentation, get a couple of us, join the Facebook group. I put the link in there. Get a couple of us online, on a WhatsApp call, on a Zoom call, Teams, wherever, it doesn't matter, and just run through it. And I'm happy, as I say, to put 30 minutes in and test that presentation and test your ability to walk through it. Because here's the thing, if you're doing research and you're going in and you're doing interviews and you're entering the field, if you're not able to present the what, the why, and the how of your research study to a select group of people who ultimately support you and want you to be successful, then you're going to struggle to articulate the basics of your proposal and what you intend to accomplish with your research when you go out into the world. And you go and you have to get interviews, or you have to get surveys done, and people are going to come with questions, and why are we doing this, and what's the value of this? And if you get this what, why, and how as a well-rehearsed message that you're able to present and talk about with people, you're just going to be more successful throughout your whole degree. And this is something that I teach you in the course. Your introduction from your proposal, a lot of that can go in the introduction of your final report. Your literature review, a lot of that can go in your final report. Methodology, obviously it'll be a difference between before you actually execute your methodology and then once you've completed it. There'll be a slight difference in that, but there's a lot of reuse from a good proposal for your final report. Okay, and then of course something that you will all have heard me talk a lot about is this importance of writing well, writing early, and writing often. And that doesn't change with your proposal. It's obviously smaller than a final report. The more effort that you put into it, the more you'll be able to reuse it for your final report. But hop onto the YouTube channel for these videos, just coaching tips about writing well, writing early, and writing often. And those of you that have got submission dates sort of March, April, etc., you now need to be writing often to get the progress that you need on your proposal. But it's just a good practice. And then once you've got your proposal, you'll see me and hear me talk about this a lot in other courses. When you finish that proposal presentation and the university has approved your study, that's when you need to start writing your final report. And while it's fresh in your mind, go and set up that final report and take everything that you can from your proposal and stick it in there. Then you're going to go through your data gathering and analysis stage. And then by the time you come back to that document, or even as you go through that, you can start updating it with everything else. Let's say you're getting ethics clearance. Take that ethics clearance certificate and put that in the appendix of your final report, because you're going to need to put it in there anyway. And if you've left it on your hard drive somewhere in a folder somewhere, that's a step that you're still going to have to take and worry about later on. Fix it now, get it done. And that's what I mean by writing early. Okay, so not just early in the day, that might be your pattern. but write early on in your study, and write early, ahead of time if a proposal deadline is due. Get that proposal done early as possible. Okay, so I'm going to put a link into the chat here, and this is the course that you'll be able to go through in a lot more detail to help you be successful in finishing your research proposal and getting your study approved. A practical guide to all aspects of successful research study, so that you can make progress on your own proposal. And a lot of people, have passed the stage of having to write a proposal, and they may be struggling, and they haven't, had a good thesis statement, or they don't have a clear problem statement. They don't understand what the significance or the contribution is that they're trying to make through their study. And this is also just then a refresher to say, well, maybe, my proposal was a bit weak. Let me just go back in there and fix it up. Because I tell you what, you are still going to have to get that right for your final report. And whether it's an honors, master's, or PhD, again, it's just the size of it that's going to differ. But, examiners and supervisors in your institution are going to look for the clarity of your thinking on all of these topics. But of course, your results and your discussion section, you can only do that once you've obviously completed the actual work in the study. All right, so that is the course that you guys will be able to get access to. And I would really encourage you then just to join up on all the different platforms and make sure that you subscribe into the YouTube channel. And that's really, I think, where you're going to get the greatest amount of benefit on a regular basis through the regular coaching tips that I provide and the webinars that we do on a weekly basis. And then, as I say, you can get the community support from the Facebook group as well. And we've got the podcast that's launched, and I put the website up there previously, and all the links to everything else are on there as well. So very quickly, maybe then just to talk through what you actually get in the course, and that's sort of listed there. So there's an introduction, a couple of lectures there, and then I sort of suggest that you start here at that second section. Then I'll go through my proposal, and then I encourage you to read widely, give you a sense of what goes in. And so the question earlier, go through those 3 lectures, just half an hour, whatever it is, and that will give you the detailed structure that you're looking for. And then the next 3 sections, again, as we've gone through in this webinar now, you must describe to your reader what you're doing, why you're doing, and how you're doing it. And then that 4th last piece there is just presenting or defending your proposal to ensure that it gets approved and it gets the best possible support. I had a couple of industry experts in my proposal, and as I went through my degree, I often went back to them and asked them, to help me and give me input. So there's about 3 hours worth of teaching there, but you can chop and change and pick and choose which of the lectures you want to go through. There's a couple of resources there. Those resources that I mentioned is actually my PhD proposal and my PhD presentation. Once you've enrolled, so click the link there, go and enroll, and you will have access to that forever. Just switch on your email notifications, because any updates that I make, I put an announcement on the course, and you'll get a notification coming through of those updates. And then there's even an assignment in there, depending on what stage you're at your proposal. I get you to make progress in your proposal. And those of you that are a bit further out, maybe haven't really started, that assignment there is going to be incredibly useful for you to get going. And then there's a certificate of completion. And I really like you guys, when you get that certificate of completion, just share on social media and tag me, find me, hook up with me, wherever it is, LinkedIn, Facebook, it doesn't matter, but just tag me, and then I can congratulate you. And of course, that certificate of completion is something that, certifies you've been through this, and you can take that to your supervisors. And of course, most importantly, you've got the right, insights and knowledge to be able to complete a good proposal. Okay, so Ivan there, actually I interviewed him in the podcast this week, and so he's actually been through this course, and he is the postgraduate coordinator at WITS. So if you do a postgraduate degree in the engineering faculty like I did, then Ivan will be coordinating you, and he also gives proposal writing workshops at WITS. And I asked him, to go through this course, and so that was his 5-star rating there, which I was very grateful for. And the last thing I would ask you all, in addition, to getting benefit from the community in the Facebook group, the regular coaching tips on YouTube, the inspiring success stories on podcasts, access to weekly updates to the mailing list. The last and most important thing I would really ask you is, I do all of this for free, and I provide this to the community for your benefit, because you deserve it. you deserve to have the support and the techniques and the skills and the tips. Universities are fantastic, but you've worked hard to get to this point. They want to get degrees done. They're also interested in publishing. But sometimes, this sort of coaching and support is not always as structured as I think it could be. So you need this, you deserve it, and this is why I provide it to you. And all I ask back is that, whether you're listening on the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube, or especially when you're doing one of my courses, please do leave a rating and a review. And it must be honest. If you don't like it, give it 2 stars, tell me why, and I'll go and fix it. But then once I've fixed it, I'd like you to come back and update your rating. So that's one of the beauties of an ecosystem of content like Udemy, where I put my courses, because the good courses rank highly in searches and create more benefit for more students because they become more available to a wider audience. So I think we've come to the end now of the session. The last thing that I would like to do is just to mention that I've actually got 2 new books on Amazon that I published, and the one that I want to talk about now is called Digital Disruption. A couple of you may have been in some of my webinars where we've talked about digital disruption. I know I certainly ran one for Pretoria University, and that is available for free if you subscribe to Kindle Unlimited. And it will become free for you regardless of whether you subscribe for Kindle Unlimited, I think at midnight tonight. So if you are inside the Facebook group, I will put a link to the free version of this book in the Facebook group. So come and join there for a free copy of the book. And I'll post that through there tonight. So just to make a note there. That I'll make that available for you. All right, so Nosipho, thank you for that. It's a good note to finish off this webinar. Really appreciate all you guys coming through. Nosipho says, thank you very much for everything. We'll definitely do the course before starting my honors. Fantastic. And I think, going through courses and webinars like this, just really, it gets you ahead. And it says, look, don't go into something and then you're always playing catch up. You're always behind, scrambling to work out what you do, etc. And I've been through it now, and I wish, to be honest, that I had a lot of these courses and webinars and content, and there's a lot of that out there, but it wasn't accessible to me, or I didn't know about it. And so what I've tried to create with these courses and these sessions is everything that I wish I'd had. And having been through it, I know exactly what you're all struggling with and what you all need in terms of the support that you require to be a successful student. Okay, so I've put all the links in the chat and the recording will always be available through the same link that I provided there. Go check out, from the first chat, the studio that I've been broadcasting from, and you can get a bit of insight to my life and how my kids helped me construct this and what the rest of this looks like around here. It'd be quite interesting, I think, for you to have a look at that. Go check out the website, www.studentsuccess.coach, studentsuccess.coach, and in there you will see links to the next 2 webinars. We've got a session next week where I'm launching a premium masterclass, and this has got over 5.5 hours of my top lectures from a number of other different sources, which I've now packaged and combined into this premium masterclass that will take you through all the 6 steps on your journey to student success, and really giving you, chapter and verse and a comprehensive, detailed insight with demonstrations and lectures and whiteboard sessions of just absolutely everything to be successful in academic studies. So that's what's happening same time next week. So make sure that you hop onto the website or you check out the links and the events in the Facebook group. And we look forward to seeing you in that session next week when we'll be launching the 6 steps to student success. It's a student success masterclass. So it's really going to be my signature course for this platform. And of course, I'll be able to provide that to you for free. And the great thing with all these courses is that it's once you've enrolled, it's available for you to hop back in and get that one-on-one teaching in an online context. Remember, guys, we're going into 2021, lots of lockdowns, lots of reliance on digital content. So the more that you adjust your approach to make sure that you're able to consume great digital content, and that you get the support and the communities that are now available through this brand and this platform, the more that you're going to be able to be successful. So Toboko, absolute pleasure. Thank you for the very valuable information. I'll definitely go through the course. Okay, so guys, you've got the link there. Hop on, enroll, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, go check out the website. Just hook in and make sure that you take advantage of all of these great resources. It's my commitment to your success. Goodbye, everybody, and thanks very much for attending. Really appreciate it, and hope you all have a super weekend ahead. And good luck with proposals.